Now, knowing different levels of psychomotor domain, let us talk about a bit the misconceptions of general academicians. Let's say in our case here, we are referring to the engineering field. And the scenario here is referring to the bachelor degree. In my country, there are differences between the bachelor degree and the diplomas. Both are civil engineering, but the purpose of the program are different. Bachelor in civil engineering produce graduate engineers. It is so that the engineering graduate can perform their job in the engineering field, supervising the projects in the industry. Bachelor degree graduate can register themselves as the engineers, but not for the diploma graduates. Not being able to register as an engineer, it is illegal to carry out the engineering works. Because of the purpose of the program different, the emphasis for the bachelor degree are more towards the cognitive, but not as high as for the psychomotor. There are requirements. The bachelor degree students will have to pass their final exam in order to pass the course. And you know that the final exam are meant for the cognitive domain. We also have civil engineering labs. It is mainly to the exposure of the bachelor degree students on the relevant tests. As we know that the bachelor graduates most likely will not end up to be technicians. Normally, we do not require them towards very high levels of proficiency, specifically P5 and onwards. Because their main task, it will be the supervisions of engineering works, which is very cognitive based. Because of this, when we do the assessments on the psychomotor domain, it is nearly impossible and not practical to assess the students of bachelor degree under P5, P6 and P7. Most likely it will end up the highest is P4. Personally, I do not believe that a bachelor degree student will reach to the P5 and onward. By looking at the mechanism in typical curriculum structure, normally students are being exposed to various types of experiment. They are not required to do a single experiment day in, day out. Continuously repeat the process until reaching the level of extremely efficiency. This is not practical, and the students do not have sufficient time to go through all this. What is more likely to happen? It will be different types of experiment. Students will have chance to do some hands-on. The most, it will be several practices. That's why it is more logical that we do the assessment up to P4. Now P1 and P2 is too simple. As long as students receive the perceptions or show the readiness to carry out certain tasks, this is already achieved. Therefore, most likely when come to the assessment, we are not assessing this. This leads to only 2 levels of assessment related to the psychomotor domain in the bachelor degree of civil engineering. Typically, university will have the practical test. Now, if the practical test is carried out with the manuals and the procedures given, as long as students can carry out the relevant tests by referring to the manuals, this can be considered as P3, and you are assessing the students up to level P3. Now, when come to the assessment, without guidance, without clear instructions and procedures, specifically when we're talking about the open-ended lab. And this open-ended lab is a part of the practical test, then we can consider this as P4. Personally, I doubt any lecturers of civil engineering program can carry out assessment on the practical test up to P5, because this related to the automatic behavior where the students has already habitually carrying out the task or skill without going through thinking and come up with highly efficient process without any redundant move. This is nearly not achievable. Not to mention P6 and P7. We are not asking the students to modify the process and procedures of the experiment in order to improve the quality of the experiment, nor we will ask the students to redesign the whole thing in order to study something. So at the end of the day, if you really understand the concept of taxonomy, we are looking into the nature and the fundamentals of the thinking order that the students really experience through. It is more realistically a bachelor degree students. We will only assess P3 and P4. Let me give you another example. Let's say now we are talking about athlete. You know how the athlete practice? They are actually building the muscle memory. They will need to break down every single movement to make it perfect, part by part, and then assemble together to become a smooth series of actions in order to increase their efficiency in carrying out a task. Now the performance of this athlete, it will be very much dependent on the levels of redundancy in terms of the movement. The best athlete will have the least redundancy in their movements. Now a typical athlete will have coach to coach them in their physical movement. Now if the athlete follow everything as designed by the coach and make all the movement to be as perfect as possible, the athlete, it will be considered under category P5. That will be the highest level achievable by an athlete. And as far as the athlete is concerned, he will have to make sure himself achieve the P5. Now when you talk about from the perspective of the coach, the requirement will be the P6 and P7. Now the coach will have to design something or modify something custom-made to tune the performance of an athlete. Different athletes have their different limitations and physical conditions. This will be custom-made to every single athlete. Now depends on the levels of originality. It is either P6 or P7. I'm not saying that athlete cannot reach to P6 and P7. It is possible when the athlete come up with his own ways to deal with the physical movement which make him to be better, then that could be P6 and P7. Now coming back to the engineering program. First, the learning mechanism of engineering students for the bachelor degree, it is not like athlete. We don't break down the every process of the experiment for the students to repeat endless time in order to increase the efficiency. We don't coach the students to carry out the experiment. We also do not require the students to have physical memory out of the entire process of carrying out the experiment. Therefore, it is nearly impossible for engineering students to achieve P5. Not to mention P6 and P7. Engineering graduates are not trained to be coached. They are trained to supervise a project, which is more cognitive based, and those skills based tasks, it will be leave it to the workman and also the technicians.